Hungry Trilobyte podcast would like to acknowledge conventions such as WhedonCon. WhedonCon is a fan-generated charity event for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Angel, Firefly, and all Joss Whedon creations. It is scheduled for October of 2020 and is held in Los Angeles, California. Portion of the proceeds benefit the Los Angeles LGBT Center as well as the Ron Glass Memorial Scholarship. See details at WhedonCon.com.
On mic today, we have Lanie Labens. How are you doing this fine afternoon?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. It's a lovely day out there.
It's hot here. It's very hot, but inside it feels nice. So.
And it's only going to get hotter as the weeks go on.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that. I haven't spent a summer in Texas in about 4 years. Yeah, in 4 years. So.
It's fun coming back home sometimes. Not under these circumstances, but.
So true.
So you and I have joined the con circuit many times together. To call you a jack of all trades feels like I'm doing you a disservice.
That's so kind of you.
You're kind of an expert on taking care of things behind the scenes. You actually have your own management company. I don't do subtle. So when it comes to the convention scene, what do you love the most?
Oh man, that varies from con to con and moment to moment, and from job to job that I've done. But I think the theme that runs through everything I love about cons would probably have to be a gathering. The fact that it's a gathering of people that are all passionate about, similar stuff, and that people are going to a con because they want to be there and they're excited to be there. And there's something about that energy that just you can just feel it when you walk through the vendor floor artist alley or the Walk of Fame or, wherever. Like you even feel it outside the event space where people are just so excited to get inside. And I love that so much because as growing up as someone who it took a while before I found people who were into the same stuff as me. When I finally did find conventions, I was like, oh, this is the coolest thing. Like, and I even enjoy conventions that are for things that I don't have an interest in because the passion is the same regardless of what the passion centers around. So, for example, last year I went to Complex Con with one of my best friends, and Complex Con is Complex Magazine. They talk about what's cool in streetwear fashion and like cool shoes and stuff like that but they're not my style. And I didn't really know anything about the world, but going to the event was the same feeling. The people had the same feeling that you feel when you go to a Comic-Con or something like that, and I loved that. It was awesome.
Definitely, I'm seeing eye to eye with you on that. In fact, this whole week I spent a lot of time talking to people on Twitter and whatnot, and they're just saying the same thing over and over again. I'm bummed out I don't have cons to go to this year. And they don't really, they think it's silly to say that. And yet I'm like, but this is such a part of your tradition now. It's like, this is a party that you have every year that you're not going to this year.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't mean to offend anyone when I say this, but I think that tradition is tradition, right? And conventions are just as important to some people as, a religious ceremony is, or, gathering for something like that. It's like something is going to happen. You plan for it, you save for it, or maybe it's a trip to Disney World or whatever it is. It's like we all kind of worship under different umbrellas of what we worship. And I think that cons definitely fall under that I've met people who literally they do everything they can to save as much money as they can for an event that happens once a year. And then when that event happens, like they're able to guilt-free just really enjoy themselves. And I think that's the best. I know for me, I'm a doll collector, obviously. And the company that I collect, they only do an event every other year. So last year they had one, and I saved for a year for that event so that I could spend as much money, as much money as I had saved without any guilt. Like wasn't cutting into any bills, or it wasn't cutting into anything. I had a specific doll fund and I'd saved for it. And so when it came time to buy things at the event, I was like, I'll take one of those and one of those and one of those. I got everything that I wanted. I didn't leave feeling like, man, I wish I had just saved a little bit more and bought this thing. I had everything I wanted, and it's such a good feeling. And I'm already, ready to start saving for their event that hopefully they'll be able to have next year.
Definitely can relate. I mean, when I was going to my first few cons, and there was a time that I was just doing this one con in Tulsa a year, and that was it, and that was my goal. And like you said, you save for a solid year, and I had even worked out so that I could have myself checked right out of my day job that Friday, get there just enough time to. There was actually a time I ordered cosplay for that convention. It was delayed. I had to ship my costume to the hotel and grabbed it as I checked in and wore it an hour later.
I love when that timing works out. I've had that happen for work purposes where it's been a far more stressful situation waiting on product, but I know exactly what you mean, where it's like everything's got to go just right and it's down to the wire. But that's awesome. I started going to cons in Austin, obviously. Actually not really in Austin. I started going to cons in Dallas more so because there's an amazing event that's now owned by Fan Expo, but before it was owned by Fan Expo, it was owned by a couple guys, and that's kind of where I started going to Comic Cons. I had gone to other cons before. I got my start professionally in anime cons, and I started doing anime cons in probably 2009, I guess. Well, no, would have had to have been earlier than that because that's probably like 2006 was when I started and doing some panels at Anime Con. So that was like my first taste of that kind of con life. I had been doing doll conventions and stuff like that, but I was like, whoa, this is crazy. this is a whole nother world.
Yeah, I remember you and I had met at one of those Dallas cons, and I want to say it was 2009, might have been 10.
Think it was, I'm trying to think the first time I went to Dallas. I think it was 2010. Yeah, I think I think so. Yeah.
Sounds about right. And
yeah,
that was the point at which I was just getting into like going to several a year. I was starting to line them up on a schedule and just kind of hit them all. And then you realize, oh my God, they all kind of overlap and they are in the same span of a month. So you're traveling all, and it's a good time. And when you're into it, it's hard to stop.
Yeah, it is. I always tell people it's kind of like summer camp because you're going and you're with all the same people for X amount of time, especially with what I do with managing talent, and especially when I go to somewhere overseas. We're all kind of thrown together, and a lot of us, maybe we don't know each other or whatever. By the end of the trip, we're all best friends.
A lot of people who are not into this will ask me if it's a friendly place because they have the stereotype of you get comic book guy there from The Simpsons and he's tossing out insults, and like, are the people there nice? And it's like, every time I go, I have dinner with people I didn't know at lunch.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's because it's everyone that's just, at the end of the day, it really is like a very like-minded kind of group. And once everybody kind of gets past, once you find the thing that your common thread, then it's like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've known you my whole life.
Mm-hmm. And like you were saying before about saving up and you're making it your big trip, you're not going to go through that much effort and money and time to pick a fight with somebody.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's what I've explained that to actors in the past who had not done shows before. And like, I worked with an actor who has played a lot of, he plays a lot of antagonists, and he was like, I just don't know, like, are people just going to come up to me and just, be mean to me? And I was like, no. The reality is, even if they hate your character, they're going to come up and say, I hate your character. It's so nice to meet you. So no one, in the nearly 10 years that I've repped talent, I've had one or two instances where somebody was rude, and the rest of it has been just really people just very excited to meet whoever it was. And I think that for me, that's a pretty good indicator just of kind of how the scene is overall. Is like, even if people are going to be jerks online, when you get to the actual event, everybody's so excited to be there. They've forgotten whatever their quarrel was at the time.
Yeah. And you get into the zone of where you're just overstimulated with the things you can do and the people you can talk to. It's very easy to brush off any bad experiences.
Yes, completely. I agree.
So, and this kind of blew my mind. You're a doll collector. That didn't blow my mind. I've known that about you. But the fact that you do all this amazing stuff behind the scenes, and yet you have a YouTube channel now where you have workout videos with your doll collection, and that to me is hilarious.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, I've done one video. I did one video which was a workout. It was all kind of, it's like a long running joke, kind of just more with myself. Like my friends are involved, but it's more just been a thing with me that I kind of got into. I hate to say like I got into working out because I don't know, but I have been more disciplined and more dedicated to working out over the last probably like 5 or 6 years. And I always joked about like the, it was not something that, oh, hold on, just, yikes, somebody was trying to call me. It was not like I wanted to find a way to incorporate my dolls because I try to incorporate my dolls into every aspect of my life. And so I was like, oh, it would be really funny to do like a doll workout video. And I started my YouTube in 2000. Gosh, I just knew this the other day. Now I can't remember. In 2005 or 2006. So I started my YouTube. It's all about dolls. It always has been. And then when my job kind of took over and got really busy, I kind of put my channel aside. And then when coronavirus hit and I overnight had no work, as devastating as that is, it does give me, it is allowing me to pursue some stuff that I had not been able to pursue because I'd been working so much. So I picked my channel back up and I was trying to think what would be funny and different and stuff like that I could do. And that's when I was like, oh, I keep joking about doing a doll workout video. Like I'm just going to do it. So I did it. My dad and my sister helped me. And they were both like, please don't make me help you. And I was like, I need someone, I need someone to help me with this. Cause like, I'm going to do a plank and I need someone to put a doll on my back and like, and all this. And so, both of them got roped into it. And, I thought it was funny. And that's kind of always been the thing about my YouTube is that I forget that when you put something like that on the internet, that anybody can go look at it. So I always feel like my YouTube videos aren't, it's just like me talking to myself. They're like not, I watch some YouTube videos and people are so good at making concise points and their stream of consciousness makes sense. And mine is just like, I don't think it does. And so anyway, so I made that fitness workout video with my dolls that I thought was hilarious and was like, well, nobody else may think it's funny, but then one of my clients who is a fitness guy, we did a virtual meet and greet with some fans for an event that was canceled, and he was telling them all about it. And I was like, oh God, please stop telling these people about that dumb video.
But that's what stands out. I mean, most of my workouts are YouTube assisted. My wife and I have a selection of YouTube workout people that we rotate between. And honestly, a lot of the times we come up with funny nicknames because a lot of times you don't know anything about them other than they're doing jumping jacks on your TV. But like, if I knows that about you, if I like, you're the doll girl, that's going to make me relate to you more. That's going to make you more than just the YouTube person.
Well, that was also kind of my thought, was that I was somebody who was really intimidated by working out. And one of my clients teaches boxing, and he kept trying to get me to come take one of his classes. And I told him, I was like, I can't do that. Like, I'm not very coordinated, and I'll just embarrass. I'm not an easily embarrassed person. I'm an adult who carries a doll with me. So I'm like not easily embarrassed, but working out has always been something I've been self-conscious about. And when I started the journey longer than 5 years ago, but when I first started to try and get healthy, I weighed nearly 200 pounds. And so it was like, I had encountered a lot of people shaming me. And it's hard to get off square one when everyone's shaming you. So that was kind of my other thought with the video, was like, it's goofy and it's funny, but I know what I felt like, when people wouldn't take me seriously, that I, was like trying to get in shape, or just, trying to get healthy. It really is what it is. And so I thought, well, if I had gone on YouTube and seen someone showing me actual workouts, but through a fun lens, I might have been more excited about it. And it took me the exercise that I'm pretty religiously dedicated to. I started in 2011. But it took me a long time I had to force myself to go for the first couple years. I hated every second of it. I would get anxiety before the class. And then when it was done, I was like, yes, the longest possible time before I have to go again. And now I look forward to it. So the only, the thing I look forward to most on the planet is doing stuff with my dolls. So I was like, okay, this is how I'm going to incorporate this into something I don't love as much. And so I made that little video, and people have been really, really sweet and reached out and said how much they enjoyed it, and like just how they felt I was just being like very authentic, and which I appreciate, because I think I'm very authentic. So I appreciate
You're
that
nothing if not authentic.
way. Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, it's like, and to go back to the dolls for a second, I mean, like literally the first time we had a conversation, you're carrying a doll around with you, and we were at a con, so I just figured maybe you were selling them. That would make sense. So I said, hey, what's with the doll? And you said, I'm a doll person. Yeah. And that's as much of a conversation as we needed to have about it. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it was just, you made the point. I understood it. And that's, when you're not a pretentious person like that, that's all you need.
I agree with you completely. And that's kind of how it took me a long time to get to that point, again, because I was bullied growing up, and I encountered a lot of people expecting me to explain why I did something. And then by the time and then when I found cons and I was like, oh, there's someone in a fursuit, there's someone, dressed as like Sailor Moon, like it just, everybody was really doing their own thing. And I admire that so much in people when they just unabashedly be themselves. And now I just turned 29 last week, and now I'm to the point where I'm very liberated in the fact that like I don't feel the need to explain myself or my dolls. I have them with me all the time. My dolls have been to 20 countries, they've been all over. And anybody who's going to make fun of that or shit on that I feel sorry for them, because I love that. Most people that are that way don't love anything as much as I love my dolls, and a life without passion is just such a boring existence. So mine happens to be passion for dolls, but whatever yours is a passion for.
And I find it interesting that we're having this conversation while I'm standing next to the Barbie Dream house where my daughter has her stuff. And I didn't even make that connection till just now. But I would say I don't know much about dolls, but they're right here. Dolls versus sci-fi in general.
Dolls versus sci-fi in general. What do you mean?
I mean, like, you have passion for this, which I know nothing about. I know
Sure.
You're also into sci-fi comics and stuff, which I know tons about. Help me fill in the gap there.
So, I am from a small child. I think my kind of love of things like sci-fi and fantasy and stuff started. It's always a building thing, right? I mean, one of my earliest memories from about 4 years old is watching the Batman the animated series with my mom. I love that show to this day so much, and that kind of started and Power Rangers. That and Power Rangers, I was like mad obsessed with. And that kind of started my love of those kind of things, and then it just kind of branched out. I was probably gosh, how old was I? I was pretty young when I saw like Blade Runner for the first time, and I was like, oh, I like this. Like, what is this? I've always been kind of I like the idea of like, oh, what if? Like, what is the future gonna look like? What is that? And so I love things like I loved Logan's Run and Soylent Green and Blade Runner, all these like old school sci-fi things, and original Trek. I watched original Star Trek growing up because my mom had liked it. My mom likes it. My mom had watched it as a kid. And even like Gilligan's Island, which is sci-fi in a sense. And so I grew up watching all of those things. And then things like Batman Beyond, which is cyberpunk. Then that came out when I was in middle school, I guess like into elementary school, early middle school. And I was like stoked on that. And so it's all kind of a building. When I was in 8th grade, I got really into vampire erotica. That's when I started reading all of that. And I had always loved vampire stuff. And that's probably kind of my main, the other thing I'm very, very passionate about next to dolls is that kind of fantasy world with vampires and werewolves and stuff. And I like things like Underworld, where sci-fi and fantasy meet, and you have vampires fighting werewolves using UV guns, and like all, I don't know, or I guess it would be the werewolves fighting the vampires using the UV guns and stuff like that, and the silver bullets, and like how their futuristic take on it. I love that kind of stuff. And I will watch anything sci-fi, pretty much anything sci-fi or fantasy. I always joke that I don't like teen fiction, unless there's a some sort of magic or sci-fi element, and then I'm all about it. So like, I was never really into, Nicholas Sparks wasn't my thing, but if one of the characters in a Nicholas Sparks movie might have had like, you know, like a cybernetic arm, I would have been totally into it. Or if one of them was a vampire, sign me up. So that's kind of, and then I would say where the dolls fit in with that kind of stuff is that I write my own stuff, primarily short stories, and not all of my dolls, but several of my dolls are characters that I have created in my short stories, and my dolls are my little 3D muses. And I will write a short story and like look at them and think, oh well, if I put you in this situation, what would you do? And so I think it's funny when somebody meets me and doesn't know much about me other than I collect dolls, and they'll be like, oh, like your dolls are so cute, or they like your children, and I'm like, no, I'm their god and their deity. I have created their universe.
It's interesting because you're talking about everything that you just mentioned you like is dystopian in some way. Your Blade Runner, your Soylent Green, your Batman, and yet I'm looking. Your dolls are all extremely cute and fluffy and light, and actually, it's starting to make sense. Just trying to see, you know, you just have two very vibrant halves of your personality, and you're just having them work together as a team.
Yeah, I think you've summed it up better than almost anyone else has in my life. I have this very, like, the thing that I love dystopian, it is definitely my favorite. But I think the thing about all the dystopian things that I love is that in every single one that I love, there's some character in it that has hope for better. And that's something that I am definitely consider myself a realist. But I am always optimistic that there are better things to come in any situation. And so my favorite stories are the ones where all hope looks lost, except through, you know, impossible odds, the hope is found, right? So yeah, so I think that's where my two halves of my personality merge.
I could see that. I could definitely see that. So you're looking to maybe, and I'm just going to play with possibilities here. So you said we're just talking about what the future could hold. Could you want to take your writing somewhere where it takes a more concrete form, into a novel, a movie, comic series?
Yes, that is actually that's exactly what I want to do. That's what I hope my next phase of life is. I'm working on a few things right now, hoping that one of them will catch. I went to college at Texas State. I don't know, being from Oklahoma, if you're familiar with it at all, but it's college
I married
here.
a Texan, keep that in mind.
Okay. So, you know, yeah. So Texas State, I went to Texas State, and I didn't love it. I didn't love college in general. But I took a screenwriting class. I think I had like 3 semesters left, and they introduced a screenwriting course, and I was so excited, and I took it, and I really loved it. And we had to do, for our final project, we had to write 30 pages of an original screenplay. And so I wrote this story, and I was like, oh, you know, and we had to outline it first. And my problem up until that point with writing had always been that I could start something or I could have an ending to something, but I had problems having a full story. And because I had to outline that, I was like, oh, I know where this story is going. So I put it down for a while, finished school, stuff like that. And then I picked it back up. And then I decided, I was like, oh, well, you know, this would make a really, well, at least I think, I was like, this would make a good novel. I'm going to take what I've turned the screenplay into, or I'm going to take the screenplay and just kind of novelize it. So I was working on that for a while. I seriously, and I mean this, it's hard to believe, but I mean this. I've worked on it in 15 countries. Like, I took time to write in 15 different countries when I felt inspired. And then I got super busy the last couple of years, and hadn't written on it as much. I ended up scrapping 90% of it. Like, story, no, but like actual text, yes. And I was like, oh God, why am I trying this? Like, this is not working. And then the last few months before quarantine, kind of like, I don't know, I felt good about it again, wrote a whole bunch, and then quarantine hit, and I've been working on it really consistently the whole time. And it's a novel, it's fantasy. And so I'm really hoping that once I finish it, that I can get somebody to look at it, because that's what I want my next phase to be. Cons are amazing and I love it. And obviously provided they come back, I would love to keep doing them, but writing is my passion, writing something I've always enjoyed. So I'm really hoping to pursue that. And now I know so many people, I know so many writers now. And when I started writing at 14, I didn't know any other writers. I was just like a kid, like that didn't have a lot of friends, that just kind of had to create her own. And that's kind of how that all started. I guess I was even younger than 14 really, but now I'm like an adult. And when I tell someone, oh, I like to write, or like I write, they take me seriously. And that's always a surprise to me. So yes, that's what I hope. I have a friend who's an animation writer, and he has advised me to put together a couple spec scripts for animation. So that's something I'm working on also. So we'll see.
Really glad you have that kind of drive on that, because I could definitely see that being fun. I've not read any of your stuff, but would like to.
Well, I have short stories on my website, which I'll send you the link. They're all intertwined. They're all about the same characters pretty much. It just kind of like there's a couple I'm more proud of than others. I'll recommend those to you so you can get a taste of what I think is my best work that I've put out there.
Everything that you send me, I'll make sure goes on the show notes so people can check out your work, follow along. And I'm known for finding stuff that I can reread and then have you back on the show. So that might be something that we end up doing.
I would love that. I love to talk about it. I love to talk about writing, and I love to talk about my characters and and everything like that. So, what's really funny though, really quickly before I forget, I wanted to say, because you're a big Star Trek person,
This
right?
is correct.
Okay.
A few episodes.
Okay, right. So my best friend is a huge Star Trek fan. And I was telling him I was coming on your show today. And he said, oh, well, if he ever wants to talk Star Trek, I would love to go on his show and talk about Star Trek. So I said, I will talk to him about that. So here I am talking to you about it.
I don't even know who this person is, but based on your recommendation alone, let them know I'm interested. I'll have them on right away.
Okay, great. He had a lot of feelings about the most recent incarnations that he shared with me, and they meant nothing to me because I have not watched them and I had no input. So I know he wouldn't tell me he was disappointed that I couldn't have discourse with him, but I know it had to smite a little bit.
Sure. We had actually a 3-part chat with Madison Spencer Engel, who, among other things, was a costumer on Voyager.
Cool.
And she was like, we dissected the entire Picard and part of Discovery, so it'll fit nicely with that. And I'm sure that person will want to see those episodes too.
Yes, I'm sure he will. He's an agent at a pretty decent sized agency, and so he's like very professional guy. But I know him as like goofy best friend guy, so it's always funny to me when he gets nerdy about stuff all of a sudden. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Like, you're a fun nerd guy. I forget, when I see you being work guy, and I forget that you love things too. So I think that he would really enjoy that.
And one of the things we covered was, and this is not about the Trek, this is about fandom. If you don't like something, that's cool. You're entitled.
Yeah.
Just don't be an ass.
Right. Yeah. I have a very strict policy of not I'll have a conversation with someone if they want to have a conversation about something I don't like, if they want to have a conversation about it, but I don't broadcast that. I don't put it on social media and stuff like that, because just from working the little bit that I have in the industry, and I know how hard people work on stuff. And I know, behind the scenes stuff that happens in different places. So I try never to openly shit on something, but if I'm having a conversation with someone, I'm going to be honest. And I've been honest to creators to their face. Like, I see where you're going with this, but your execution was not great. So I'll be honest, but yeah. but it's like I feel like it's a fine line, because again, I agree with you. Like, if you don't like something, that's fine, but there's no need to be an asshole about it.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat you are, is that I will often have to talk face to face with people who made, in some capacity, something I didn't care for, and it's like I don't want to put it down because I know you worked hard on it, and you, just because I didn't care for it didn't mean it wasn't good.
Right.
I'm not the end all be all decider of these things. So let me
There's-
just talk. I want to know maybe why you liked it.
Right. Yeah. There's a couple things that I very, 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 very much dislike that are hugely, hugely popular. I am very much in the minority. And so I'm like, you know, I'm so happy for you that it was successful. That's amazing. That's great. I will not be tuning in, but I wish you all the success in the world.
Mm-hmm. And that's okay, because I think most people who have a lick of sense will know you're not going to make everybody happy. And if the people you don't make happy just go about their business, that's okay.
Yeah, there's just no way. And I also am a big believer in, I don't hold grudges, and I try never to harbor hate, because it's just such a waste of space in your life. And I feel that way about media. I don't enjoy, like, if I watch an episode of something and can tell from the first episode it's not my thing, then I just walk away. I don't dwell on the fact that, now that isn't, with that said, there have been things that I've been so disappointed by because I wanted to like them and just couldn't, and then I have a tough time getting over that. But most of the time I just am able to just walk away and be like, I hope it's successful. It's not for me.
Well, you know, I'll give a great example here. The show Supergirl. I am a huge Supergirl fan from the comics. Yeah. Love that character. Love almost every incarnation of that character. The show came out, and the first episode was like, it's taken a while to connect with me.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? Maybe it's not the right time for me. Maybe I should let them go through a few seasons, then come back to it later and see how the bulk of it is, rather than try to judge it from this episode I'm watching right now. And that's what I'm going to do. Doesn't mean it's a bad show. Doesn't mean it's a good show. It just means that's how I'm going to take care of it.
Yeah, I get it completely. I am not, I will enjoy anything to do with vampires. I love it all. But there are some things that just didn't quite grab me like other things. And I think in our current climate, in how we watch TV, I would rather things get a little further in before I start them too, just because the worst is something that I loved that I watched recently was A Discovery of Witches. It's on Shudder, or AMC has it, I think, also. And I somehow thought there were 10 episodes in the first season and there were only 8. So when it ended, I had a meltdown. I was like, what do you mean you're going to end it like that? What are you doing to me? And I was like Googling frantically to make sure they got picked up for another season. And it was like, I wish I would have waited. They did get picked up for season 2 and 3, and part of me, and that covers all the books that are written, and part of me wishes I would have just waited instead of watching the first season and just feeling just like, I want more right now. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's something that I think that we're starting to get a little bit more now, in that we have different distribution methods and people don't have to watch things. And I think the binge watching culture, although I'm not a part of that, definitely benefits from that. Now, I like to spread out like one episode a week, one episode every 3 or 4 nights, something like that.
Oh, good for you. I am like an obsessive binger, but I have been for a very long time. Before, I was that way before Netflix, even as in a like, or streaming services, because my mom is a obsessive DVD buyer, and so she would, the minute something came out on DVD, like shows came out on DVD, she would buy them on DVD, and then I would, even if it's series that I've seen before, like the animated series, I would sit there and just like gorge myself on it, just watch an entire season in a day. I'm pretty sure I invented binge watching. I just didn't know that's what it was called.
Well, I like to kind of mull over an episode for a couple of hours, even a couple of days, come back to it, because I find when I do try to binge watch, I have so much content at once. It's like I'm not thinking of the possibilities. I'm not thinking of what's going to happen. Why would this happen? What the alternatives to that happening? I need a couple hours, or at least a couple days in between.
I think that's good. I will say there was a show I binged. I had a 10-hour car ride and I watched a season of a show the whole time. It was 10 episodes. It was, 45 minutes to an hour, basically. And I hated it, hated the show. And I think that if I would have watched it week to week, I wouldn't have noticed the continuity errors the way I did watching it back to back. Because when I talk to people who are like, I can't believe you didn't like it. What didn't you like? And I pointed out the continuity errors. They're like, oh yeah, I didn't notice that. And then I had to think about it, and I was like, well, yeah, if you watched it week to week, they were probably subtle enough to where maybe they weren't a big deal. But I was watching it all at once, and so to me, I was just like, well, that doesn't make sense because that person did that in the last episode. You can't do that if you're doing that. So I ruined it for myself by binging it.
I could see that.
So I like your method. I need to try and apply that. I'm doing a rewatch of X-Files right now, actually. This will be the third time I think I've gone all the way through the series. So
I'm going to confess, I was a huge X-Files fan when it first came out. I actually dropped off at about 2/3 of the way through the show and never tried again. So I'm due to try that all over from start to finish.
I would recommend it. It holds up so well. The last time I binged it was probably 2 years ago. The first time I watched it in real time. It started when I was in, oh God, how old was I? I was very little. Just like Buffy. Like I watched Buffy in real time, and Buffy started the fall of 96, which is when I started kindergarten. So I watched it. Obviously, like we didn't have rules at my house. There was no like, oh, this is an adult show, you can't watch this. My parents were like, watch whatever you want. And I turned out fine. So obviously it's okay. Yeah, so I watched Buffy in real time, and then I got the DVDs. I got all the seasons on DVD in like a freshman in high school. Like my mom is a present giver. So like my first day of freshman year of high school, I came home and the DVDs were on the box set was on my bed. So I rewatched it then. And then I rewatched it in college, and then I rewatched it after college. So I've rewatched it a few times. And X-Files and Buffy's great. Obviously, I love Buffy, but X-Files I noticed I was shocked at how well it held up. I was thinking X-Files might not hold up as well just because technology is so different, but it's kind of incredible. So I definitely recommend giving it a shot.
I will definitely do that. Okay, well, Lanie, why don't I let you go while we're ahead here? I've got a hard deadline up that I got to meet. So where can somebody follow your misadventures on the internet and your writing?
My social media is all my first and last name. I made it that way so people could find me. My YouTube there's a link to my YouTube, probably on my Instagram for sure. And then there's a link to my writing. My website is lanielabens.com, and the short stories are all under blog. So thank you so much for having me. This was a blast. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for being here. I'm glad you had fun. I had a blast too, and I'd like to have you back again sometime soon.
I would love to come back anytime.
Anytime. Okay, I'll talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good. Bye-bye.